Hey folks, Charlie and Westeros here, back from the dead after many a millennia to discuss episode 1 entitled Winterfell of this final season of Game of Thrones. While in this review I will focus on discussing the episode, I do plan on making a predictions video for episode 2 in a few days, so do stay tuned for that if you are interested. Anyway, without further ado, let's get right into discussing this episode. The first thing I want to highlight is the brilliant overhaul they've done to the opening sequence. My hunch is that every episode will be seeing the freezing portion of the map move progressively more and more towards the south, thereby indicating the location which the White Walkers will have reached by said episode. So the next thing I want to talk about, however, are events at King's Landing. I think that what was truly conveyed from the scenes in this location is that Cersei truly and fully doesn't give a damn about anything except maintaining her grip on power. When Qyburn informed Cersei that the White Walkers crossed the wall, the fact that she was pleased her enemies would be decimated by the undead army was quite clearly conveyed. However, it does also make me question her intelligence somewhat. Naturally, she might not fully grip the extent of the White Walker threat, but underestimating a vast army of undead seems like a pretty foolish thing to do. Qyburn's surprised reaction also conveyed that sentiment to me as well. The same goes with regards to her not-so-secret attempt to bribe Bronn in trying to kill Tyrion and Jaime with Joffrey's old crossbow if they were to survive the White Walkers. Now, I realize Bronn is a sellsword, but I feel that this far in the series, it would be weird for him to betray the Lannister brothers considering the buildup of their friendship. Granted, the setup for Shae's betrayal some 4 seasons ago also seemed weirdly done in the TV series, so perhaps I shouldn't put it past him. Regardless, I still feel that, knowing his closeness to Tyrion and Jaime, convincing Bronn to go and kill them is a pretty weird choice on Cersei's part. Also, small anecdote / known gossip I want to slip in here. When Qyburn told Bronn he was there on behalf of the Queen, I was a bit surprised because IRL, those characters' actors, i.e. Lena Headey and Jerome Flynn, used to date and ended on rather bad terms, and thus allegedly can't be on set together. So when they just about hyped a meeting between those two characters, I was quite surprised, but clearly Qyburn acting as her messenger killed that possibility fast enough. Also, the fact that Qyburn spoke so highly of Cersei and about how he owes her everything because she rose him up when he had nothing makes me suspect that Qyburn just might turn against his queen by the end of the show, especially when you pair this scene between him and Bronn in contrast with the earlier scene with him and Cersei. But for now, it's only a hunch. Also, the fact we get introduced to Harry Strickland and the Golden Company was another nice little indirect nod to some book-only events that I might discuss in a separate video. The more overt nod was, of course, the mention of elephants not being brought over to Westeros. As many book readers already knew, the Gold Company have war elephants, so there was a lot of hype surrounding the possibility of elephants in Westeros, at least from quite a few people I know. As a result, Cersei's disappointment was a nice little echo of those equally disappointed fans who also really wanted to see some elephants in Game of Thrones. The last aspect of this scene I want to touch on is Cersei's relationship to Euron Greyjoy. Her interaction with him felt like a back and forth of power moves, and normally I would have seen her giving into his advances as an indication of something of her vulnerable side manifesting itself, and in a way, there was a hint of it. However, I do think her inviting Euron to her chambers wasn't so much her giving into him as it was her merely desiring affection, especially since Jaime's departure and her evident willingness to have her twin killed off. Moreover, Cersei's slight emotional reaction to Euron's comment about getting her pregnant also makes it clear that the one thing she just might care slightly about in the world is the safe delivery of her unborn child. Anyway, moving things along to Theon's rescue of his sister was a short but truly quite sweet scene. I think it was a nice way to properly end the internal struggle Theon has felt for so long regarding his conflicted loyalty between the Iron Men and the Starks, and in a way it was nice seeing Yara give him her leave to go and fight with them. I think that scene, just like many of the scenes that took place in Winterfell, truly make it feel like a tying up of loose ends sort of episode, for a lack of better words. To discuss events at Winterfell now, well, there is certainly a lot to get into, which is quite apt considering the title of the episode itself. The first scene of the boy climbing a tree to watch the arrival of Daenerys' army immediately brought me back to the very first episode of Game of Thrones, when Bran climbed the wall at Winterfell to watch out for the arrival of Robert Baratheon's retinue. Of course, it was a little bittersweet considering Bran can no longer walk, but also his personality has completely changed from what it was in Season 1. Daenerys meeting and complimenting Sansa, who then responds rather coldly, was again a perfect mirroring of the very first episode of the first season when Cersei compliments Sansa's beauty, and at the time she reacts happily and blushes at the compliment. I think this contrast really helps to show how Sansa has come to be wary of flattery coming from queens visiting from far away. Given her suffering at the hands of Cersei Lannister, I can certainly understand why she would be wary of Daenerys as well. The meeting of the Lords of Winterfell, meanwhile, with Jon Snow, Sansa, and Dany, went as well as I think we could really expect it to go, given the circumstances. The fact that, again, the Northern Lords are distrustful of outsiders comes across loud and clear in the Winterfell scenes. One thing that did kind of bother me from this scene was that Sansa Stark beckoned young Ned Umber to return to his home of Last Hearth with carts to bring his people back to Winterfell, despite just finding out that the White Walkers had crossed the wall and that Last Hearth is the northernmost keep south of the wall. It would almost seem that he was being sent to certain death, and sure enough, my worries came to fruition by the end of the episode. Another thing that came to fruition was Arya's reunion with a multitude of characters, including the Hound, Gendry, and, of course, Jon Snow. Her encounter with the Hound was appropriate given the circumstances, and her interaction with Gendry clearly hints at an impending romance. At least that's my hunch. The weapon, however, she asked him to make did have me a little confused because it almost looked like a spear that can come apart and have something hidden inside, like maybe a dagger. This type of weapon would almost seem to be more fitting in Dorne, but regardless, I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes of it. Anyway, despite all three of Arya's meetings making me excited, I think her meeting with Jon was my favorite one by far, considering they hadn't even seen each other since Season 1. The episode was also remarkable in contrasting Arya's relationship with Sansa as being the complete opposite of what it was in Season 1, considering she replies to Jon's quip by saying that Sansa is the smartest person she's ever met. Such character changes also tie in nicely with something Varys mentions to Tyrion in Davos, that, quote, "Respect is how the young keep us at a distance, so that we don't remind them of the unpleasant truth that nothing lasts." Personally, I think it also plays to the audience's feelings as well. Not only is it a statement about life, growing old, and the inevitable truth that we all will die one day, I think it also reminds us that things as awesome as the TV series of Game of Thrones aren't meant to last forever, unfortunately. But I also think it's an indication that this slower-paced, more peaceful episode isn't going to be the norm for the season. Still, in terms of the present, though, one thing I did enjoy was seeing Jon getting to ride Rhaegal. I know many people thought it came rather soon, but honestly I think it was the perfect time for him to get to ride a dragon, considering it happens just before he gets the big reveal about his ancestry. Moreover, it also helps foreshadow the fact that he'll likely be riding a dragon during one of the major battles this season, or at least that's my hope. Also, one hope I and many other people had was to see Ghost this episode, which alas didn't happen, but I do think something big involving Ghost and Nymeria should happen soon. Again, it's a point I'll mention in my predictions video next. Now, once Jon and Dany landed, Dany made a comment about staying 1,000 years together near a waterfall with him. The first thing that came to mind was Jon's liaison with Ygritte back in Season 3 in the cave, and part of me thinks Jon's mind just might have wandered there as well, considering the look of mixed emotions on his face. The last Dany scene of the episode was her confession to Sam that she had executed his father and brother. I realize many people still resent Dany for that action, as do I, but I think the scene sort of sets up the fact that she's going to have to learn how to deal with the consequences of her choices if she is to rule Westeros. I also realize she came across as rather cold in the scene, but I suspect guilt is something that is on her mind, and I think that once Jon confronts her about her actions, she will come clean about her regret, or at least that's what I hope. The scene involving Jon being informed of his true heritage by Sam was absolutely perfect. For one thing, back in Season 1, Ned Stark said the next time he'd see Jon, he would tell him about his mother, and here we have Jon in front of Ned Stark's statue, discovering the truth about his parentage, as well as his true name, Aegon. Another thing that came out of this scene was something Sam said verbatim, that Jon should be king by right and not Daenerys. It's certainly a conflict that will exist in the background as the Northerners confront the White Walkers soon, and I think will play a leading role in terms of the dynamics between Jon and Dany. Now, of course, the last scene in Winterfell ends in a cliffhanger with Bran creepily waiting for his old friend Jaime Lannister to arrive at Winterfell. With so many characters at Winterfell who hate Jaime, especially Daenerys, it will be interesting to see how interactions with this character unfolds next episode. And again, here I have a prediction I will be making on the matter in another video. The last location I will need to cover this episode is, of course, Last Hearth. Events at Last Hearth were, in the words of LaDonna, my fellow small council member, horror gold. As I watched the scene, my friends and I were fully expecting a White Walker or White to jump out of the halls as Baarack Dondarrion and his men meander through the castle. I also have to mention that golden moment when the men of Castle Black exclaim that Tormund has blue eyes upon seeing him. The craziest moment, however, came when the men discovered the corpse of little Ned Umber on the wall with a motif of limbs around his body. The second you start seeing the face contort a little is when you know a jump scare moment is imminent. The one thing I will say about the fact that they strung up Ned Umber is how it shows even more so that the White Walkers clearly have some sort of self-awareness. They seemingly must have known that Ned was the Lord of Last Hearth and thus intentionally chose him to be decapitated and surrounded in a motif of limbs on the walls of his keep. The fact that the White Walkers made this symbol yet again makes me really want to discover and understand the symbolism behind that image, something I'm hoping they'll reveal to us by the end of the series, and if not then at least once they make the prequel series. Anyway, I will leave things at that for now. Overall, I thought it was a fantastic setup episode for the final season. Yes, it was slow-paced, and I was hoping for a bit more action, but I do think that will be coming very soon. As such, I would probably give this episode a score of 8.5 out of 10, and that is according to Game of Thrones standards. That said, please let me know what you thought of the episode in the comment section below, or if there are any other aspects of the show you'd like me to cover. Do stay tuned for my episode 2 predictions video coming up in a few days as well. Moreover, I will also be uploading some other GOT-related videos as the season progresses. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and I will see you all next time.